Good morning to everyone. This is Keith Moore here, CEO of KDM and Associates, co-founder of the IAEOZ Summit 2021. It is indeed a delight and my pleasure to introduce to you today the panel that will be coming before you to speak about and answer some of the questions that we're asking them. In this case, the title is What Works to Access Capital and to Achieve Equity and Inclusion, particularly in opportunity zones, particularly in those communities that are classified as distressed, those communities who house often around the nation are historically Black colleges and minority serving institutions, and where you will find, data will show, minority business enterprises who have the opportunity to create workforce, to expand their revenue base, to simply deliver services and become a solution provider to the government and provide those, in the case of minority businesses, supplier diversity for corporations across the country. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Kim Cooley, J.R. Baggety, a returning member of our family at the IAEOZ Summit, and Eric Yost, who is from HUD, better known as one who will challenge and inform and engage you when it comes to opportunity zones, community revitalization, and affordable housing, rural communities, and most of all, encompassing, like it's an umbrella, economic development. Thank you so much for being here with us, and we are excited to just turn over the mic to our panelists, starting with Ms. Kim Cooley. Good morning, Kim.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored.
Well, we thank you for being here, and we are as honored because of what you're going to be bringing this global audience. Thank you so much, Kim.
Okay, I will start out by giving 1 minute of background, and then I'll go into the elements of Veterans Victory, housing, and small business centers. That is my model in the opportunity zones. It involves 240 units of apartments on a holistic campus, in addition to 15 small business offices. And it's all for veterans in an enjoyable, holistic, healthy setting. So I'm financing this with opportunity zone capital gains. And we have a lot of enthusiasm through our community partners. We have proposals to work in 10 cities so far. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself because it'll help you understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. First of all, I did start out in grade school working in a setting where my grandmother had a school for people with different abilities. And that helped shape me. But even beyond that, I worked and lived on several Air Force bases. And this is my father in the Air Force. He took us around the country. And ironically, 2 of the cities that we lived in will have a Veterans Victory housing and small business center. Also, my father's story is very important because his wife, my mother, went through an explosion in 1977, and that impacted all of us. We learned how to work with people that have heard the bombs, have heard the terrible noises, and suffered great loss and experienced physical pain. 40% of my mother's body was burned, and many of the pieces of her body had to be covered with pigskin because she had 3rd-degree burns, and it was impossible to take her own skin and cover it up. So after that experience, you can see, fast forward today, that I am combining all of my education, PhD education in public policy and applied economics, In addition to working for a Native American tribe and 20 years of banking, all of that is going into Veterans Victory Small Business Center. So I will talk about the 5 elements of the Veterans Victory Center, and then I'll break for a few minutes and we can have a little dialogue. And then after that, I will talk about how I actually created this opportunity, what actions I would recommend to other people that are working in opportunity zones. Then we'll have some more dialogue. And then after that, I'll give you the 5 really global general takeaways. So I think we'll have a lot of fun, but I just need to talk through the 5 elements of, of Veterans Victory. First of all, we have the small business entrepreneurship boom, and that is across America. Veterans make great small business owners through their ability to get veteran government contracts in military areas and construction and in housing. Then we believe that we can bring our veterans together with our technology, Advent Edge technology, and help the veterans super excel in landing the contracts. And it makes so much sense because the veterans tend to be well-trained in logistics. And this is the perfect opportunity to marry their experiences with the Veterans Victory Holistic Campus. Also, the small businesses in turn will be able to generate a minimum of 4 jobs each. So Eric Yost will love to hear this. For every $10 million in investment in the opportunity zone, we are helping to create 45 jobs. Just to build the Veterans Victory $67 million project in Colorado Springs, our Keystone project, we are going to be using 600 temporary workers. This is the modern theme for economic development across America, and that is job creation. So we'll be creating jobs directly through our purchases and investment and construction, and we will be creating jobs indirectly through the small businesses that we support. Secondly, we are bringing broadband to rural areas through our patented middleware technology. We are using GTSD Global and Advent Edge technology with 20 patents. It's called Smart City Technology, and that will help the veterans buy and sell through a market intelligence clearinghouse. Also, in addition, the broadband helps to produce measurable metrics that we can report to our investors, to the taxpayers, and to the community. We are able to bring critical information to small businesses to help them succeed. If you look at the studies about small business failure, you'll find that 62% of the businesses fail because they don't have the right information. Our technology will counteract that because we're purposely creating a veteran information buy-sell clearinghouse. And this will help our small business decision makers have the right information at the right time for the right people. Next, we have our veteran-owned small business development program from the banking side. And what that means is that we will have bankers coming on site every week to help teach financial literacy and provide technical assistance to our veterans. We will be thrilled to have veterans get the small business loans and to get their mortgage loans. We're just fine if our apartment renters move on and grow up and get their houses, and we're going to support them every way that we can. Now, the banks are benefited because the loans the investments and the service hours that the banks provide are all Community Reinvestment Act qualified. So that helps us understand how we're helping MBEs and even our precious students. And that is that we are helping to promote veterans in areas that are majority minority. If you look at the 8,700 opportunity zones across the United States, you'll be able to overlap that with the huge majority of military bases and the majority of the majority minority census tracts. Finally, we have an extraordinary carbon footprint reduction program. And what that means really is that we are going to cover our own electrical costs by collecting solar energy, and we will be able to use that electricity and Advantage software to keep our veteran community safe and the neighborhood. And we are going to pass on our solar energy savings to the investor. Okay, I'll stop here and we can have some conversation.
You know, thank you so much, Kim, because sometimes our audience recognizes the comprehensiveness of such great information, but we have our other panelists and we want to give them equitable time. But I got to tell you, I didn't miss a beat, and I was so effectively, engaged, because what you talked about in your project is literally covering, what Eric would say, probably the administration's Build Back Better priorities, number one. Number two, you segue, and thank you so much, into talking about banking and accessing the capital. And you are answering the question, what works? And now I think we're going to make sure that someone like who's over 20 years in the banking and private equity end of the business, J.R. Baggerty from MBDA, to segue in, probably directly respond in some of the things that he's just heard. And I look forward to that. J.R., please take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. And good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Jean-Robert Baggerty, also known as J.R. Baggerty. I work at the Department of Commerce at the Minority Business Development Agency, otherwise known as MBDA. We are the only agency that's focused on the growth and global competitiveness of minority business enterprises, or MBEs. So just real quick, an overview of the agency. We have mainly three major buckets: access to contract opportunities, access to global markets, and access to capital, which is where I work. And essentially, we have a network of about 50 business centers. Some of them are specialty centers, including advanced manufacturing, exporting. Keith, Keith is the recipient of a new grant for the Federal Procurement Center. So congratulations to you. Look forward to doing big things with you. And, we have some other specialty centers as well. But right now, with the landscape, the economic landscape, with all the racial and equity inequities right now, you can imagine our agency is very, very busy with a lot of private sector entities looking to partner, looking to set up programs to try to get this capital out. And just because of the economy right now, with a lot of money floating around, I should say, there's opportunities. Right now is the time right now to create these programs to go forward. So just a little bit about me. I have probably over 30 years of experience in banking. I've been in the federal government for about 22, 23 years, 10 years at the U.S. Export-Import Bank, 7 years at the SBA and the Venture Capital SBIC program, and now about 6 years at the Department of Commerce. I also was a banker in the private sector, so I'm well versed to talk about access to capital. In terms of access to capital, there's two buckets, I guess I would say. Obviously, access to capital is the number one impediment to the growth of small businesses. But it's not that easy. I mean, there's capital that's out there, but knowing how to get it is key. And that's where what Kim said, the technical assistance and the knowing how to apply to get this capital. And so that's key. And so a lot of that is kind of like, you don't know what you don't know. And so that's our job to educate the masses so they can, plug in to get some of this capital. And so when we talk about opportunity zones, it's I believe the program started last year or 2 years ago, but it's a great vehicle to attract capital into these underserved markets, to create businesses, to create jobs for growth and development, workforce development. So I think just when you peel back the layers and looking at the big picture, this is a great opportunity to transform communities, to create jobs, to build workforce development. And then, when you talk about the MSIs, the HBCUs, that's a perfect complement because a lot of these opportunity zones are in areas where these schools are. And so that creates an opportunity for students to learn and to grow and excel and matriculate through this whole process. As Kim said, there's various opportunity zones throughout the United States. There overlap with hub zones. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that probably two of the most forgotten opportunity zones are what I call onshore, offshore, and that would be in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Opportunity zones, tax incentives, all sorts of things. So at our agency, we're all about trying to connect the dots, facilitating collaborative partnerships that can help our MBEs grow in size and scale. So just really happy to be here today and amongst the panelists. And so hopefully I can shed some light and glean some nuggets for your panel today.
JR, you certainly will, because we're going to not only put you on the spot, but give the audience the opportunity to plug into the chat and load up with questions. And this on the world, not just here. And I'll give you a second or two of my own diatribe of why I believe it is important for us to go beyond our borders when we talk about information exchange. I want to get back to what now the two areas that I've just heard and just ask you all, the panelists, what your thoughts are, because Kim is literally, as we have done at KDM in the past, we market with a target in mind, and her target is the veterans. And to me, while every target population has its own preeminence of importance, and every one of them have value of significant order, she takes her project, and from the time that I met her in Denver, and her vigor and her background with her mother and father, her family in the veteran community, the war zone, the battle zone, people, the heroes who have gone where many have not, on behalf of those of us who haven't. There's valor in that. And so I think about those brave men and women who have gone across the globe to protect the flag of America. And now they come back home and have such a challenging time, and our data shows that. This sounds like a spring well. What's that place that you go and you dip in the pool and you literally come back reinvigorated, right? I'm hearing such great major programmatic capacity building, confidence building that she hasn't even talked about on the mental health side that is addressed. And I'm really curious, and you should too, be audience. Does this attract investors even more? Is this what they talk about with social impact? Is this what we talk about with ESG? Is this good for the environment with her solar energy? All of these ideas and questions and even comments, your experience and expertise should be brought to the floor, and we welcome that. What I also hearing is this notion, and I have a big question, and Eric, you know, going back to the Genie Bond discussion and our webinar, et cetera, is the banking business, the CDFI business, the access to capital where in fact, is this true? Is this bank really going to participate in the way, Kim, that you indicated that? And what did you do to stimulate that level of commitment? Or are you at the beginning conceptual stages of that? Because if you are just at the conceptual, we want to do everything we can to promote a banking environment that is committed, as we all are, to distressed communities, revitalizing our communities, helping our veterans in ways that are very comprehensive, with solutions that are not just siloed into, we'll give you an affordable house with a low interest loan. Okay, then you lose it. Or do I understand your disability? So I'm very impressed with that. And Kim, you want to give a response to that? And then, you know, JR, talk from the banking perspective of what our response would be.
Right. Yes. Well, I can give a plug to TBK Bank, because what happened was they went to the site and we all got excited. It's at the top of the hill and we're going to have a huge flag and a monument. My daughter's a welder, so we'll put a beautiful red stone dash metal monument there. And the bottom line here is that TBK Bank then brought the boss and then the boss of the boss. And that bank has a technology background. One of their sub businesses is technology. So somehow we found each other, but we have a long way to go in encouraging the banks to see that their investments, loans, and their service hours in the opportunity zone are very powerful and impactful. And the banks tend to be risk averse. And this is where we all need to encourage the banks to understand that if the money from the capital gains is sitting there in the checking account and it's being used to operate the rentals for the offices and the apartments, then there's nothing safer. The bank can monitor that money sitting in the account and it can help provide the collateral in addition to the brick and mortar that we're creating. I'll show you a picture. Here's a picture of the apartments. They're very modern, and up here and along the sides, we'll have the solar panels. So we're going to be generating all kinds of business for TBK Bank, and they saw that right away. So they're saying, okay, what can we do? Now, the point with the CDFIs is that maybe if a CDFI would want to help me with the guarantee, the CDFI could help guarantee the loan and talk the bank into giving me the loan that I need. And then plus there are wealth management clients that the bank has, and those wealth management clients want to escape the taxes. So if we had innovative bank boards that wanted to buy into this, the OCC has written and they say opportunity zones are CRA qualified under CRA modernization. We've got to get the word out.
Wow. Eric, what say you from a housing urban development perspective on all that you've heard?
Yeah, Keith, thank you so much. And Kim and JR, you know, what's so fascinating for me to hear these discussions is just the topic that we're talking about is what works, right? And I think that's what's so critical here is we have demonstrated through the series of different decades we've gone through of what works with community development and economic development for communities, but we've also observed what hasn't worked and what we need to work on. So that's why I really like this topic, because we know what works and we know what we need to work on. And I think what Kim eloquently stated was putting together a project that needs access to capital, that's going to need to blend and braid various sources of capital in an opportunity zone that can then leverage that to create jobs of which we all want, to build that wealth within communities, whether we're targeting veterans, whether we're targeting MBEs, or whether we're working in historically Black colleges and universities. And this is about people, right? This is economic development at the end of the day, is about helping people to succeed and helping the places to become places of opportunity. And so what I find so fascinating about this discussion, and what I think Opportunity Zones has done, is it's actually brought to the forefront a series of discussions. And I'm very appreciative of what Keith and your team has done, bringing these discussions to the forefront about what is equitable growth. You know, what does that look like? What does a healthy community of opportunity look like, where the capital and access to capital is actually flowing to those that have not had access to capital? And then thinking through the other pieces at the same time, as Kim shared and as JR shared, is what does this engagement model look like for the various players that are involved? How is this going to affect the people in place, the target population, veterans or MBEs, or the people in and around HBCUs or attending HBCUs or part of that broader community? And how do we look at it from an equity perspective, right? How do we look at it to make sure that the benefits of these transactions, the benefits of decisions we make as people that either hold capital, administer capital, or help people to put capital structures together, how do we make sure that this is done equitably, right? And so what we have to look at is we have to have an intentional focus on looking at where these communities, whether it is veterans or minority businesses, enterprises, or people that have attended and around HBCUs, including our rural communities, where we have to be intentional about thinking about what works. But while we're thinking about that, we realize we failed those communities. And so we need to realize through this equity and transparency, look at what has demonstrated success. Look at where we've seen amazing Opportunity Zone, qualified opportunity funds set up with a clear focus on veterans, on HBCUs, communities, on minority business enterprises, to create that transparency and equity that we need to ensure that everybody has access to that capital. Everybody has opportunities to build the wealth that they deserve and have a right to develop for themselves. And then are we transparent with this? So Kim was so great about sharing, and I tell people this all the time, when you're talking about your transaction, tell everyone how many jobs you're creating. Let them know how many permanent jobs, construction jobs, how many jobs for the community, who's getting those jobs, where the training is, because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about building wealth in communities and building wealth for people so they can have their choices. And so I think, Keith, what I think is so great about this discussion and access to capital is because when we're talking about this and hearing what Kim said, hearing what JR and his experience is, and then just leveraging my expertise over a couple decades in different aspects of this work communities, it's really about that two key areas: blending, braiding, and sequencing funding, because we know the funding's there, but how do you blend it and braid it and sequence it to get your transactions done? Whether you're a minority-owned business trying to start up your business, whether you're someone out of college and from an HBCU or working in an HBCU and in and around that community to develop enterprises and entrepreneurship, or whether you're veterans that are seeking opportunities, whether it's to live or develop your own businesses and excel, so you can have access to that capital, whether it's federal government, private sector, it all needs to be blended and braided together. And what I tell everyone is don't listen to the naysayers, right? Don't listen to people say, it doesn't work, this doesn't happen, it can't work, it's not happening. There are hundreds of transactions we know that works. Right? And we can look at those as examples. Watch what Kim is telling us about what she's putting together as she's learned from others. Listen to JR and sharing what he's done, because we have evidence that we see that people have taken the fact that opportunity zones exist to leverage for both social impact, to leverage it to ensure that people that have been underserved, that haven't had access to capital, have received it. And we need to focus on what has worked. Don't focus on the anecdotes of where it doesn't work or it's not serving what you're trying to do, but focus on people that are making this work. And we need, as a community, and practice of community is what you do such a great job of creating, Keith, is that opportunity for us to share that information. Because if we can be transparent and share what's happened, we can share the results, then we can measure and show those outcomes that we want. We want to show that we're building wealth within these communities. We want to show that people now have access to capital that historically haven't had access to that capital. And we've seen this evolution of opportunity zones share that people have, the way that it's transpired over the last couple of years has gone from a focus of, like excitement over getting all this capital, but how do we actually get the deals done and where are they getting done? And we're seeing that the deals are getting done across the country, but it takes a blending and braiding and sequencing of capital.
I like that blending.
Not, the OZs aren't going to make a bad deal good. Well, who would ever do a bad deal? Like that doesn't never make sense to me. Like you're only going to do good deals. So no matter where you have capital, you're only going to do good deals. So you need to show that your deal is good to anyone, because it makes no sense that anybody would put bad money into a bad deal. So your job is you need to be the person that's engaging the community, that's talking about the equity of your investment and how you're trying to do this, sharing and being the person that's transparent about that, so you can talk about what you're trying to measure and show those outcomes. Because at the end of the day, whether you're in government like JR and I are, that have access to federal funds at unseen amount of funding we have right now, or you're in the private sector, in the equity markets, in banking, or whether you're in other local government, at the end of the day, we all are trying to move our capital into markets, move it into places to people can access to be successful. And so, when we talk about equitable growth, that's where we have those intentional about where we're doing it. And the last thing I was going to share about that was, opportunity zones by and of themselves shifted that discussion about we have underserved communities, capital gains, where would that money have gone if had not gone to where it's going now? And I think that's the question I always try people, have people ask. That money may have gone to a completely different avenue had it not been for Kim stepping up and saying, I want access to this qualified opportunity fund and that capital gain coming into my transaction. So at the end, what I would just want to share is I've been through kind of in my career at HUD, I've been working on what I like to say is the urban development side of HUD and working on economic development. But I also spent time in the private sector and commercial banking. I was an entrepreneur that grew my own company from a startup to selling it to a big corporation. And then also in the early stages of the low-income housing tax credit program. And my experience across both banking, equity markets, being an entrepreneur myself, and then in federal government, is that the more you know about access to capital, the more you educate yourself about all these sources, the better you can put your transaction together. So you're not the person that's saying, hey, I need money because I have a bad deal and I need to make it better. You've got the good deal and then you can show why you can get access to this capital and why it benefits people to invest. So that's kind of where I'd leave it, because it goes back to your why we're here today is what works. And we do know things do work because economic development does happen. Places do get money, but we want to increase it so that we can make sure that veterans, minority businesses, and of course, our HBCU communities have access to the capital that they historically have not had. So that's what I'm excited about today.
And thank you so much, Eric, for at the last part of what you just said about making sure HBCUs and MBEs get a part, essentially saying, become a part of the action, right? Okay, so I am going to now, given all that has been said, challenge each one of you in a way that hopefully ultimately inspires your entire agency or organization and the world. Okay. Homeless, veterans, housing, affordable, and the gap with the banks. She talked about one bank. She didn't talk about a plethora of them. How do we get HUD to take a project concept and recognize from a public sector perspective how industry has the potential to drive, in partnership with public policy, a new channel of funding availability by the banks.
Yeah, and one way to do that is the Omaha 100 model. Back in 1992, a company spearheaded a big group of bankers and said, okay, how about if we all share with our grants and with our mortgage loans, this idea of incentivizing the construction managers, minority-owned construction managers building the houses. And the name came from 100 new houses in Omaha each year that had the minority incentive, plus the grants helped make the employee relationship, the administration go, and then the loans themselves were shared among all the banks. That has been award-winning since 1992, and very few people follow that model, but it makes no sense, because why wouldn't a bank enter into a risk-sharing opportunity like that and then earn a BEA award from the Department of Treasury? It's a no-brainer, and then all they have to do is report it to the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, the OCC, whoever their regulator is. They just step up and say, here's the CRA verification report. And that's part of my service. I literally give each banker that I'm talking to the one-page CRA certification. And Eric knows this really well. It has the moderate income census tract, the hub zone, the opportunity zone, the enterprise zone, the zone after zone after zone. And then it's a slam dunk. This is CRA qualified. And what we need to do is back to that clearinghouse that I was telling you about. I have a chart. When I talked about Advent Edge software, right here we have business intelligence. This is middleware that's going to speed up the broadband. So we're collecting business intelligence on healthcare, training, e-commerce, job placement,
Yes,
startup, and banking. So that is where we can all work together, especially banking. I think the department HUD can work with savvy business people that are interested in this clearinghouse of exchange, and we can just accelerate this process, this knowledge process, because we do need the investments. The first time I had an investor, then he actually stole the deal, and he kept saying, oh, my father was in World War II and my grandpa was in the Battle of the Bulge. And it was ultimately where I was 2 weeks away from getting my loan from UMB Bank, and then the guy stole the deal. So that's where opportunity zones can be hurtful, just like any investment opportunity. But then my attorneys, my team of 4 attorneys, foolproofed my strategies. So now I'm protected. If another person comes in and does that, I'm protected. I want to share that with other people. Technically, I am a minority. I have a disability, and I'm an SBH women-owned business. So I want to share the pain and suffering I've been in with other people.
JR, listen, we're getting down to the wire of being able to know that we've had a dynamic conversation that can't be forgotten. I hope you all would be number one. Number two, JR, minority business development. Let's do something even bigger and talk about the Department of Commerce, the project that you've heard, the HUD relationship with rural. We haven't even gotten into that, and we will, ladies and gentlemen. Economic development. You see a supply chain opportunity here by a developer who understands banking. Give me your thoughts on both the Commerce Department, MBDA, and capital to a project like this in an opportunity.
Okay, so first of all, there's a term in finance we call a capital stack. So I don't think that one bank is going to take that whole piece. So if you reach out to the appropriate banks or lending institutions, it could be 3, 4, or 5. And they would all like to participate in this because at the end of the day, it's a real estate deal. So first of all, you could start with the SBA 504 program, which is specifically for real estate. Then you could come in with some other banks, maybe even some venture capital money, maybe SBIC, In my former life, I used to work at a place called Navy Federal Credit Union. It's the largest credit union in the world, and they specifically lend money for their members, and a lot of the members are people that are coming out of the military or the Navy. And so in my experience, I was an underwriter there. A lot of them start businesses. So we could go to Navy Fed, we could go to, I also worked at Industrial Bank, the fourth largest minority-owned bank.
Oh, okay.
So, you have different pockets of money that could be appropriate, and maybe they're not going to do the whole deal, but again, at the end of the day, it's a real estate deal. And so in this economy right now, with all the money printing going on, the low interest rates, there's nothing better than to invest, put your money into a project like this. Why? Because it's hard assets, and it's going to go up in value. So in that respect, it's a matter of not selling the deal, but explaining it right, explaining the benefits, explaining the job creation, the economic development. And I think that way, if it's explained that way, you're going to have a better chance of getting it approved. It will be approved, but you just have to have the right partners on board. Now, in terms of NBDA, the Department of Commerce, HUD, the same type of thing for supplier diversity. In these projects like this, that's cascading from the top all the way down. We're going to see not only opportunities for mixed use or commercial, but as Kim said, the subcontracting, the builders, the small businesses that will be open in these things. They're not even mom and pops, but maybe small franchises or something like that. There's opportunities from the top all the way down to the bottom. And us being a minority business development agency and our ability to connect with other government agencies, we can make that happen. So, I think it's all about, again, access to capital. It's not just one bucket. There's various buckets, and you have to know, like one of my colleagues says, you have to know how to go in the front door, the back door, the side, all the different angles, basically, to get the deal done. So it could be some traditional financing, some alternative financing, but at the end of the day, you have a consortium of lenders, of financiers, and you can get the job done. You can get it done. And so with the financing complete, then you can, like I said, get your subcontractors, get your supplier diversity, franchises, or et cetera. So, I mean, there's opportunities there. I'm not to use the word opportunity, but I mean, there's definitely for MBEs, for veterans, for all different participants, women-owned businesses. There's opportunities to participate in these type of projects.
I'd like to tell you about Cheryl Cordova and put a plug in for the training universities. Cheryl Cordova is Filipino, and she started helping me through a housing board, and we were working on nonprofit housing development together. Now she's going to get a $6 million solar panel contract through Veterans Victory. And then she has a shot at getting the contracts for the other 10 cities. So this is how we can help each other, by sharing this information. And the plug for training young people is that solar energy has two of the fastest growing jobs, phototechnic jobs in the United States. And solar is the thing, the cutting edge that's really making my Veteran Victory project work. So if I had young people to speak to, no matter what their ethnicity, I would say, try to get into solar if you can.
Yeah, definitely solar and tech are two of the main things going on right now. And in terms of connecting the dots and bringing in, students or universities into this smart city concept, it's a perfect opportunity or a perfect scenario to put, incubators or anything like that into those projects.
Absolutely, I love it.
Kim, the census tract, does that designate you in rural community? I'm curious.
Well, there are whole counties that could be considered low and moderate income.
Your project is
Oh,
in.
mine?
Yes.
Yes, oh yeah, mine is in a moderate income census tract, yeah. The average poverty rate is very high, 45%.
And it's in rural, it's not city, it's urban.
It's in the county, it's in El Paso County, and it's outside of the city limits. So I'm actually working with Mountain View Electric Association to sell the surplus solar energy. So yes, it's rural. The broadband, the Advent Edge increases the speed. And you may not know this, but the CRA deserts track with real deserts in the United States. And we think of CRA food deserts. Well, there are CRA broadband deserts that reduce the ability of minority individuals, including minority farmers, to use the internet efficiently and run their machinery that's now all on computer.
IAEOZ, we have literally 2 minutes. For you, 3 minutes, because you are a subscribing family member of the IAEOZ fan club. But there's been so much here. What would you go back and tell Secretary Fudge and Assistant Secretary Keenan about this conversation, and what recommendations, 1, 2, and 3, would you make to the agency that would help expand projects like this and their success?
Yeah, great question. I think, it's interesting, and I think taking off of both what JR's expertise and what he shared, and Kim's, knowledge and practical expertise going through a transaction, two things that jumped out to me just immediately from both of their conversations and thinking about it was, number one, is there are entrepreneurs out there that have amazing ideas. The second, how do we make sure that they get access to the capital that people historically have not had access to? How we cannot make sure that that capital flows to organizations like Kim's and those that JR had mentioned through his organization, his federal agency. How do we be intentional about these strategies? And that goes to, where are we showing that we are making those intentional efforts? Are we actually, documenting what our intentional strategies are by sharing our outcomes and our impact that we intend to have, right? We talked a lot about the impact of her project. What are we doing at our agency? What are we doing at HUD to say, we are now mirroring what the private sector is telling us to do, is show where is our impact happening, right? Government is complex. I always say private dollars make federal dollars work smarter. Private sector moves faster, right? It moves more fluidly. Federal government, we take time, but we have bigger dollars to put in, and we tend to do more planning activities. So we're a little slower to moving. But when we do move, we hope we're moving in the right place, because it takes us a long time to correct where we move to. So what I think we need to do is, number one, I always say listening is number one. You have to listen to veterans, you have to listen to minority owned business and entrepreneurs, and you have to listen to the HBCU community. Bring them to the table and listen to what's happening right now today. Hear what's happening today. Number two is, based on what you're hearing from what's happening, and this whole discussion of what works and what access to capital is what are the recommended changes that as an agency we make at HUD, or whether we're any other federal agency, to make that access to capital easier? What are we committed to doing, right? And what is going to be done differently than what's done in the past? And then the third is, we have a lot of dollars that we spend on planning activities, right? And helping with technical assistance, as Kim said. And I think the key that we want to do is, we need to be accountable to the people that haven't been getting this. So we need to be able to show, yes, we may have provided, technical assistance, and we may have provided, webinars or trainings, but did we provide it to the veterans specifically? Did we go and reach out to veteran communities and do it specifically for them? Did we reach out specifically to minority-owned businesses, talk about what JR said about procurement opportunities, about, contracting opportunities with the government? Did we intentionally do that? And can we measure that and share that with the public? And then what did we do for the HBCU communities? We can talk about what we're going to do, but what did we do? And are we going to commit to sharing what we do and making that public to show that we are making a progress to giving people access to capital that historically haven't? And I think that's, in government, we have a responsibility to the public sector. We're public servants. And if we are not being transparent and intentional about our strategies, then we are just kind of repeating the past. And we know that what works to build back better, what this administration's about, is ensuring that we're building back better, that we're incorporating this issue of justice and equity, whether we're talking about racial justice, environmental justice, whether we're talking about housing justice. We need to be very intentional about our strategies, but we also need to share what we're doing back to the public, where our money is going, not just be awarded these grants, but did it go to veterans and how many? Did it go? Do we have dashboards to show? Did our money actually go to veterans? Did it go to minority-owned businesses? Did it go to HBC communities? We need to be public and visual about what we're doing so that we can be accountable back to the taxpayers and to the groups that have been underserved. That's just my commitment to make sure that I can bring that to the table.
Listen, I love the conversation, and I even love more your commitment, Eric. Very much so, because, and I will in all candor recognize in my own processing of this discussion, admit that there's been very little talk about HBCUs or where HBCUs fit into this. And frankly, I think it's like a sector that you have to give enough time and attention to make sure you're really drilling down. And I don't think there's a question in this type of project as it relates to veterans that there's hope on the horizon when a project like this can actually, morph into realization, right? We need one, we need to lead by example, and we will get to the HBCUs here at the IAEOZ because we're committed. We made a commitment from a 5-year program to engage industry, education, institutions, and government, and also NGOs, and for and on behalf of HBCUs, minority serving institutions, MBEs, in opportunity zones. This is a powerful discussion, ladies and gentlemen. From around the world, we have given you the opportunity, and we'll, as we close, ask you to send in your questions and comments. We will deliver an amazing social media engagement that will keep you tuned into this conversation. There are some continuing naysayers, and we'll never get rid of all of them. We don't want them to, because we, as I'll use the term, we want to elevate the transparency and increase the accountability. And so if we take all stakeholders and we don't call you bad or indifferent, we call you a stakeholder that's important to this process. Thank you so much. This panel, if it's any indication of the rest of the discussions ahead, we are going to have an amazing, dynamic, impactful, not only memorable, but truly transformative discussion that's going to make a difference. And thank you so much, each and every one of you, for spending an hour of your quality, precious, and invaluable time. This is Keith Moore here from KDM and Associates, bringing you year 2 of the IAEOZ Summit 2021. We thank our media team, Zahn and company, Wonder Group. We thank all of our post editors and production team, because I think we've given you something worth your value, and we look forward to the end product. Thank you so much. Signing off for now, continuing this conversation, converting it to action. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.